Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Shiloh Johnson, founder and CEO of ComplYant, a technology platform offering business owners and entrepreneurs a simple way to manage rules and requirements. Shiloh, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really excited to dive into your background, your entrepreneurial background before you started the company, and also where the company is today and the different mechanics behind building. Before we get into what's going on at ComplYant now, what were you doing before you started the company?
I was running a tax practice. I worked in corporate tax for 14 years, which is basically in-house tax teams for large corporations. And then I left that and decided to run my own practice, and I did that for about a year or so, and then ComplYant was off to the races.
Yeah, I love that. What was the experience like working kind of in a larger organization, then kind of taking, I guess, what insights or what strategies or structure did you take from the large company, then building your own, and then now into compliant?
Yeah, for sure. So, just for context, I worked at sort of legacy, been around for 100 years types of companies. So I worked at Technicolor. I also worked at Airmark, literally 100-year anniversary while I was there, like very old. And what you learn in the structures like that is just an extreme governance, because
Mm,
obviously, how do you operate that long without it? And so you learn very quickly the value in some of those things, but you also are very eager to disrupt. So I cherry picked what I could take with me in terms of structure and organization and the power of making sure that parts and pieces work. Um, Everything shouldn't be grassroots. Some things you do need structure around. So that
yeah.
helped me a lot. I think I was so part of the work that I did in my career was basically we would take all of the new lines of business that the entity would get into, and then we would basically do all of the tax research for that new line of business. And
Mm,
then we would go and get all the permits and registrations in every jurisdiction that it required for that new line of business. So let's say Airmark was going to start selling shoes. We went and did all of the work based on that new line of business. And then we would do all the taxability requirements. And so I took that bit of my job,
yeah.
and when I left and was running my own practice, I was supporting these small businesses that were like didn't have that support. So no
Mm,
one was doing that for them. So they didn't know that in, LA you needed a business license or a fire permit if you
mm,
were operating, a certain type of store. And so that's where I took my expertise from corporate and said, "Oh, this is a whole. I'm going to do this and I'm
yeah.
going to productize it." And then here we are.
Yeah. Is there, based on the location you're in, is it fairly prescriptive what you have to do to be within compliance of whether it's a new line of business or your current business? Or do things change based on the type of product that you have or service that you have?
It changes. So it changes by type of product, type of service, where you're doing that, all the way down to the zip code. It
Really?
changes. And then also think about like most people only think about tax by like income tax. There are actually 10 types of business tax. So you're talking about compliance at 10 different levels. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. What are during your private practice days, what were some of the most exciting businesses that you were able to work on? And I get some stories that you kind of maybe inspired you to move towards the
Yeah.
technology route and enabling people kind of on a broad
Oh
spectrum.
yeah. Oh yeah, so there's a couple things there. So on the exciting side, I had a mentor at the time who runs a business management firm, which if you're not familiar, that's just sort of the accounting and business management for celebrities and athletes.
Mhm.
And she is a minority woman, so she's the largest minority-owned business management firm out of LA. So she had a lot of like sort of clients you would know, and she had some smaller clients that she couldn't use, and so she ended up saying, "Hey, can I help you get your practice started? Here are these like benched athletes and C-list celebrities." I was like, "Yes, I will take it." So instantly, I was like engulfed into their world, which is
Yeah.
at a very minor scale. I mean, we're not talking about Denzel Washington here, but it was definitely very exciting just to see like how their lives worked and to have sort of a front row seat, really, because business
Yeah.
management is every aspect of their lives, how they spend their money, how they maintain their homes, and so you really get a front row seat to their lives, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And then I just love tax. So all things around taxes are is exciting to me.
Yeah.
But some takeaways, which really prompted ComplYant getting kicked off the ground. I had a client that ran a franchise. So she had a location of a franchise she had bought into,
Mhm.
a restaurant. And it was pretty kind of well known, but I don't think she had ever ran a business before. She just had a very successful son. And so her son sort of, to put her up, bought her this franchise. And she was just doing all the things that are not correct. I was like, whoa. And that really sparked the idea. Like, for example, she was like reading her own like tax code for the state of California. And if you read it, it says like food isn't taxable. Like if you go to a grocery store in California, you're not paying sales tax on groceries.
Right.
However, if you warm that food up, or if that food has carbonation in it
Yeah.
or alcohol, it is subject to sales tax. And that piece she didn't understand. So she was charging people sales tax because the POS system required it, but then she was keeping the money. And I was like, oh no,
Yikes.
so you want to go to jail. That's not how this works. That's not how this works at all. And these are, folks that are relatively tech savvy, at least minorly enough to be dangerous, So I was like, oh yeah, I think there's space here. Like, and I was like,
Yeah.
how did you even learn about tax? Like, where did you go? What did you do? She was like, I just Googled. And then
Yeah.
I tried to go to the state of California and figure it out, and I didn't really know what to do. And I was like, oh yeah,
There
that's
needs a
not gonna
better,
work.
yeah, there needs
So
to be a better silo for that information for sure.
yeah,
What
yeah,
are some of the
absolutely.
common ways outside of that experience that you see,
Yeah,
businesses or people, or entrepreneurs, that kind of
yeah.
find themselves in trouble, in not being compliant with the tax laws and codes and things along that nature?
Yeah, two areas. I think that people try to play and do successfully play the ignorance card. Like, well, I didn't know I had to do this thing, whatever that thing is, insert tax requirement here. But the state, the local government, the federal government, they don't care. This isn't a
Yeah.
matter of like, well, you didn't know you get a pass. No, no, no. You didn't know, and you still owe us $40,000. Please pay us tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big misnomer. People I think thinks that like, oh, I'm gonna fly in on the ignorance boat and that should get me through. And that just never works. The other thing I think I see a lot is people are very afraid of finance and tax. And so they
Mm,
tend to do the absolute least.
mm,
And as a result, they get penalized. Like it's better to go in blind and just like kind of feel your way through than to do nothing at all. And I see
yeah.
just all too many times people just don't do anything and they don't apply, they don't try, they don't figure it out. They get the notices and then they ignore them. And then it becomes a much, much, much bigger problem later. Oftentimes, a lot of those things you can, resolve relatively cheaply or free. And people just aren't
Mm.
aware of their power. So they tend to just not do anything, which I think is just a huge mistake.
Yeah. Where is that, kind of, inefficiency in accessing that information? Is it the complexity of it? Is it the
Yeah.
resources that you're gathering? Where is it? Especially,
Yeah.
in communities that necessarily don't have a pedigree to kind of fall back on in
Yeah.
terms of resources and network. Where is that access and
Yeah.
why is there such a disconnect?
I think somebody else asked me this question. I think it's a couple of things. I think it partially is linked to our public school system in the country as a whole. I don't think our public school system is conducive to helping people live lives outside of school. It's
Mm,
conditioned to help you go to college. And while I think that's wonderful, if you don't choose that path or post college, there really isn't a ton of education or information even then about finances, your personal finances. Right.
yeah.
I know I have lots of peers that I've known over the years that don't even know how to operate a successful budget or to, maintain savings account properly. Like there's lots of nuances around finance that are just so taboo in lots of cultural subgroups that the information just doesn't get talked about. And when it doesn't get talked about, there's no group share, there's no group think, well, what are you doing for your sales tax? Oh, sales tax. Oh, I'm doing this. Or, oh, what are you doing? No one's talking about it. Everyone's just
Right.
like tight lipped and we're all pretending that we're balling out on TikTok. Like,
E-
no, no, we have to be honest about like, I'm broke. I can't afford to do this thing. Please
Yeah.
tell me what the alternatives are. And if we can have those conversations more, we can get down to the meat of like, how do I get better? Because you can't change anything if you're still trying to pretend like everything's perfect. And I think that's what's happening a lot is
Mm-hmm.
that we're still under the cover of like the pretend and trying to appear
Mm-hmm.
like our lives are better than what they are via social media. And I think so there's a bit of that. And then also just tax rules are so unbelievably complex, unnecessarily too. It's really hard just navigating like city and state websites trying to figure out like if you sell shoes in LA, it's very difficult to figure out if shoes are subject to tax in LA. Like you're like, what, huh? Okay, I'll Google it. And then you Google that and nothing, no answer is coming up that is even close to what could be accurate. It's not even an answer. It just takes you to like State of California sales tax. What? This doesn't answer my question. So it's just the technology doesn't match with the expectation of knowledge. And I think that's where we have the greatest room for success.
Perfect. Tell us a little bit about how ComplYant is now giving people the access and how the technology works and,
Yeah.
and kind of the user journey and also obviously historically how it's evolved maybe over time.
Yeah. So ComplYant works like a massive tax database that's much easier to navigate. So basically, a business would come onto the platform and enter some information about what they do and where they do it and how, like if they sell in person or online or some combination of the two. And so then our system will use that information to return back to them all of the tax types that would apply to them based on what they do. And then we calendar out those deadlines for them across the year. So that's like step one is like, okay, here are all the things you have to do. Don't forget to be on time. And then we do what we call like tidbits of information that I've just learned over my career, and some of my team members have learned over the lives of their career. It's just things that you may not have known and that are not readily available on a website. So that you just have learned from being involved in the career over time, which we think is our like secret sauce. So for example, in certain states, if you don't have any sales, let's say you have a down month or a down quarter and it's zero, you still have to file the return. And if you don't, you get penalized. And a lot of people don't know that. They just think, well, I didn't have sales, so I don't have anything to file. But that's actually not true. You have to zero out the return and submit it. So it's like these little things that you don't necessarily know, we provide as like little nuggets of value so the business understands like, hey, this is how I can best position us to get started and move forward. And so on top of that, we've built some additional products. So we think about taking the business owner from awareness to budgeting to saving to complying. And so that's sort of our 4-part structure. We now offer like a budget tool. So we help them, now that you know all the tax types you need to pay by quarter, let's think about how much of your revenue you need to put away for those tax types so that you're not being hit with these massive bills you can't afford. And then we think about saving. Okay, also, let's think about saving you from yourself if you're not the type of business owner that can forethink and save and you need a little help in that area. We will take out in daily and weekly increments deposits or withdrawals from your revenue deposits so that we can put them in an escrow account that's held up for your tax so that you're not overspending money that you should be setting aside for tax. And so now we're getting into the filing and paying piece across all of the 10 tax types I mentioned that happen. So that's who we are as a product now and in the foreseeable future. And then where we started was just a very basic tax calendar. So I don't even think it was a calendar. It was just like a spreadsheet, like every tax type and like all of the deadlines for those tax types. That's what we were. Version 1 was a spreadsheet that I owned, that I had built over my career. And then I just slowly began to productize that spreadsheet. So that's how we kind of have grown.
Yeah. Well, just like historically, what were the products that were being offered and where were they lacking in particular that, obviously from what it sounds like now your whole product encompasses everything that is necessary to run a successful business and a compliant business. But where were the incumbent products and how were those lacking?
Yeah. So if you have ever tried to file your tax, you're probably saying, oh, I needed this. That's because it didn't exist. So if you were a business prior to ComplYant or you didn't know we existed, what you would have done is you would have tried to go to the city of Los Angeles.org and then you would have tried to Google are shoes taxable in the city of Los Angeles? And then you would have had to like read some notices or like scour some tax code and try to figure out if it is or it isn't. Oftentimes no one's doing these things, so they're just getting hit with penalties because they're waiting for the state or city to come find them. So that was sort of what was happening before. And then if you're like a competitive product, like let's say, if you think about fintech or tax tech as a whole, it usually exists in 2 spaces. It's usually like bookkeeping, which is the precursor to tax filing, or then it's like single tax type filing. So if you think about TurboTax, that's an income tax product or a single tax type. Or you think about like TaxJar, that's a sales tax product or a single tax product. So it's very fragmented. Like Gusto is a single tax product. So you're going to 6 different sites to try and take care of all of this tax, maybe, if you are even halfway compliant. And then there's this thing we call nuisance tax, which is like your permits. There's no site for that. You just like, I don't know, shrugging my shoulders and figuring it out. So we sort of took all of that and said, okay, let's bring it under one umbrella and give people a soft place to land.
Yeah. What was the process of kind of productizing? I don't think a lot of founders maybe chat about this. Maybe that's on me.
Yeah.
But what's the process of productizing, and how was that learning it from a non-technical and very non-technical background in terms of that whole I guess learning period or
Yeah.
whatever? What was that process like?
Oh, it's hard. I have zero technical background. I have zero startup background. Again, I come from legacy corporate, like companies that like don't even have apps, like very, very legacy. And so I didn't have the awareness as to the time constraints that live
Mm,
between here's my idea and here's the truth of it living in the world. Those things, like the distance between those
yeah,
two, is not a short distance. It is like miles and miles long. And so the first thing I had to get over was sort of the fragmented version of my idea, or sort of the MVP or scaled back productizing that people don't think about or talk about. I think a lot of times people are like, I want to make an app or I want to build a website, and they have this grand idea and they shoot for building this grand idea version one, and it just can never be that. So that was the first roadmap hiccup of like, whoa, you can't have a fully built tool. You have to have some fragmented thing that's like held up with shoestring and glue. That's exactly what
and then
we had to
patched by
work
duct
through.
tape
And then
over time.
also, exactly, so flip it around and then, hold it there, heat it up, hope it doesn't fall off. So that definitely was a hard point for us. And then also, I am just a dreamer by nature. I call myself a product founder because I love the product of accounting. I love the process of tax. So for me, the product side of it is love, love, love. There's just language barriers around how engineering and PMs talk about product versus how I'm
Yeah,
thinking about it. And so that's something I think too that CEOs or founders don't take into consideration is like your idea is just that, it's just an idea, and there is a journey it has to go on to make it into product phase. That some of the idea gets stripped away or doesn't happen at all or isn't even realistic, or maybe there's different patches or there's an API we could build that is some version of what you want to do, and then you have to tweak it. So there's all these things that you have to sort of work through that require you to be a lot more fluid as a founder, because you just aren't going to get this
yeah,
hard and fast result that you saw when you were like noodling it on a piece of paper. It just never,
yeah.
it never does that.
Yeah. I was super interested in I chatted with another founder in semi-similar space,
Yeah,
kind of giving access to
yeah,
tools and information to underserved kind of businesses and entrepreneurs
yeah,
that, didn't have the whether it was the funding to actually access the more,
yeah.
I guess, complex tools, or even individuals and service individuals to help. And one thing that she mentioned to me was that one challenge was offering a product that's a fair cost, and then focusing on
Yeah,
growing that and growing the user base, and then using that to compound, versus trying to go upstream and upmarket to enterprise companies or mid market.
yeah,
What's been your strategy around
yeah,
going, offering a very fair and affordable cost product that's extremely
yeah,
valuable, but also kind of, thinking about investors and this whole, projections and all the things that encompass a growing, scaling
yeah.
startup?
It's a little bit different for us because tax is a requirement.
Yeah.
And it's a hard and fast, expensive requirement. So we get to live a little more freely in that sort of pricing space
Mhm.
where, but I still, to my core, am very committed to the small business and making sure we can be a product they can afford. So I defend until the ends of the rope my pricing structure, but pricing is fluid anyway. I mean, it changes, literally it's changed so many times, but we are not a mid-market or an enterprise product, and I don't think we ever will be, at least not in the foreseeable future. So because all of those people can afford to have entire built out tax teams. And we are serving a market that can't have those things. So we get to lean heavily on like, well, we're productizing a service that, doesn't have access to a high cost, well qualified CPA. And so that, what they would be paying in CPA fees is we're a tenth of that. So we have some room because of the sort of compliance requirement, but we also um, are very committed to making sure that small businesses can always afford it. I think sometimes we get lost in expectations of investors, or asks of investors, but I'm the founder that doesn't care. I don't, because at the end of the day, we aren't much without customers. So my investors can ask for whatever they want, but my investors aren't buying ComplYant. Small businesses are. So if we price ourselves out of who we're trying to serve, like How are we going
Yeah.
to get customers? And we can't get
Yeah.
funding if we don't have
Yeah.
customers. So to me, the problem is a no-brainer. It's always customer first. It has to be.
Yeah. What's in regards to what you were saying around customers, what's been some successful go-to-market
Yeah.
strategies or ways that you've been able to reach your audience?
Yeah.
And what are some not successful ways that you've learned from?
We do so many things that were not successful. And to all of the founders that are listening, all those bumps, yeah, it's okay. We all go through it. I think there's a fair bit of naivete in the early days around what you think people will do. I think people have really grand ideas like, well, if I build it, they will come. That's not true. You have to build it and then you have to go talk to everybody and figure out if they would like to come or if they understand what they are joining. So I think that was the first mistake is I because I am a subject matter expert, I am a CPA by trade. I have been. I'm an undergrad in accounting, master's in tax. That has been my life, and my practice was like, you don't have to find clients; like they find you because they need your services. So it was never a point where I was selling anything. So
Yeah.
that became like, oh, what? So that's probably hiccup number one. But what we've been able to do as a result is so early days, the shirt I'm not wearing, actually, Mucker Capital, they were one of our first investors. They have something called MuckerLab.
Mm.
And pre-seed stage, we participated in the lab. And it's just literally you, once a week, every week, on the phone with a couple of their investors. And you're just hammering out the nitty gritty of the business. And all we did for a year straight was work on sales channels.
Yeah.
That's it. Like we're a self-serve model. And so they literally built that self-serve model for me. They helped me understand bid metrics around Google Ad, like ad bidding. They helped me understand and build up my entire metrics tracking system so that I could watch, like bid, watch, monitor, shift literally by the day. And then we were testing the heck out of everything. I mean, like every permutation of a keyword phrase we possibly could. We were just testing until we couldn't test anymore. And as a result, we ended up getting to an incredible keyword mix that just paid itself in droves. The other thing that they did for me that was really helpful was they put me in front of employee number 3 at Credit Karma, and
Mm.
her position was in marketing. Her whole job was to go out their SEO flow. So she just gave me their tools. She was like, "This is how we built Credit Karma in the early days. Take the strategy and run," and then we did. So that worked really well for us. But I mean, that's after me getting on webinars and trying to get on the phone with as many businesses as I could and
Yeah.
just talking and talking and talking and trying to figure out how are you solving this? And if what we're building is actually plugging what you need, or is it this just my version of what you need? And so that just takes time. I mean, I think go-to-market strategy as a whole is not a one-size-fits-all, and it's a
Yeah.
mix of things. I mean, we're still doing webinars. We still get on the phone and talk to customers every single day. We're still doing the stuff that doesn't scale because at the end of the day, there's nothing better than just hearing people say to you, "Here's my problem and here's what I need," and making sure that they are reading your story the way you intend for them to read it.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your traction, where you are now, how many people are using your product,
Yeah.
what's been the growth, this
Yeah.
year and into the future.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a pretty exciting year. A few things that we did that are ringing true is we got behind our metric systems. We have been able to spend more money now because we raised a few rounds, so we've been able to spend more money on systems.
Yeah.
Before we were doing everything just grassroots and like Excel spreadsheets. So we are able to get out of Excel and actually get some processes in that work. And as a result, we were able to see like where customers were dropping off at in the sign up process. So now we're able to follow a customer from how they came into us, how they got to us, whether it was ad, whether it was organic, whether
Yeah.
it was some article, and then we're able to follow them on their journey. Do they sign up? And where do they click? How long are they spending on certain pages? And so we've been able to do that work and then optimize for what wasn't
Yeah.
working. And so we're seeing some of the effects of that now. So growth over the last year has been really great. So when we first let me try to quantify this. So we first launched in 2020. And I think for the first year, we were very much under like 5 figures. I mean, we maybe had a couple hundred customers, and we were still trying to just like figure things out. But now we're at almost 9,000 customers. By customers, we call them small businesses, so our business partners. And we are, yeah, I don't know, 9 or 10 or maybe 12x in it.
Yeah. I
We're
love
getting it
that.
together. It's going good though. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we We try not to track where we were a year ago to where we are now, 'cause so much has changed. What we try to track is like where we were last week versus where we
Yeah.
are now and where we were last month. That becomes how we really measure what's working and not working. And so we're pretty good at 25% month over month. I can't complain.
Yeah, I love that. And very impressive the way I think just
Thank you.
fundamentally and philosophically how you think about that and creating the
Yeah,
more short-term goals because those are more controllable and obviously
yeah,
they grow as the
yeah,
company grows. But tell us a little bit about what are
yeah.
some of the biggest challenges that you face today?
Ooh, you don't have enough time here for me to discuss this with you. There are so many. I think hiring is one. We are in such weird times, and all of a sudden, all of these people are getting let go. And then tech already has this really interesting like reputation for talent and hiring that you're trying to disrupt because as a minority founder, there are certain, requirements just within me personally that I want to make sure we meet as a company in terms of our cultural makeup. And so there's this delicate dance you're doing between really, really high quality talent and making sure you're bridging the right culture, and then also making sure that, you know, diversity is a priority and your company is made up of what the world looks like. So there's all these things at play. It's like, will you fit? Are you the right person? Do you have the right skill? And it's literally like a shot in the dark. And sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But hiring is so difficult. So difficult. So I try not to be so hard on myself, but yeah, it's a tough mix because really the success of your company in the early years is won or lost by the help you have around the table. And so you really want to try to make the right moves there. So that's been really tough. But not impossible. I have a great team and I'm really excited about everybody we've been able to get together, but not for nothing. It's tough. It is tough. I think also time is a very delicate balance that you're constantly doing. And you're doing this between time expectations of your investors, also time expectations of your customers that are waiting for certain things to happen. And then there's time expectations of you as the founder and how you prioritize what matters to the company. And all of these things are playing tug of war. And you're trying to find like the balance between like, am I doing the right thing according to my investors? Am I doing the right thing according to my customers? Am I doing the right thing according to my company? And or into my employees, and is everybody living in harmony? And almost always it's no. Almost always it's no. So yeah, that's tough. That's been a struggle this year. And then I think just culture is a very delicate thing. And I don't know that enough CEOs, I think we're starting to see the result of CEOs that are not giving culture enough attention. And I don't just mean like time off and like, do we go on vacation? Not that. I mean culture in the sense of like, how are we talking about what matters at this company? How am I showing the people that I work with and alongside that I'm caring for their livelihood and their contributions to this company? And that's just not an easy thing. And sometimes you fail, and sometimes people don't feel appreciated, and sometimes people feel unseen or unheard. But I always tell my team and I tell any founder, like, your job is not to lead these people. Your job is to serve these people because leadership is at its core service. In order for me to get you on the boat with me, I have to serve your needs so that you are not distracted by other things, such that you can get on the boat with me. I can't tell you get on the boat with me and then drag you on the boat. It's not going to be successful, right? Like you're not going to want to come, and then when you get there, you're going to half-ass it. So I don't think about leadership in that way, and so I'm constantly trying to get in a place where my team feels supported by me, and that I am ultimately serving them. And it just isn't easy, and sometimes you fail, and it just is the breaks. So, and then mix all that with you need to take care of yourself because if you're not fully mentally and emotionally present, it's hard to make really good decisions. So yeah, that sucks.
When everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for compliance?
Yeah, our North Star. So recently, a few of my employees, I had them read this book by Ben Horowitz. It's the most recent book he wrote. I can't think of the name of it, but there's a piece of it in there where he talks about Toussaint, which basically led this like revolution and led this army of people that didn't look like him and they believed in him. And so ultimately, he did that around building this true North Star, this sort of statement, North Star statement. And so I've been telling the team our North Star statement is compliant within a few clicks. And that's where we're headed to. It needs to be unbelievably easy for people to do the things they don't want to do so that they can and do them. It's very difficult to get someone to say, please do this thing I know you hate doing, and here's 50 steps to get it done. You're almost always going to get defiance. And I think we bridge a lot of that by making it far, far easier to get things done. I mean, literally, like text yes or no if you want us to pay this bill for you. I mean, just very, very
Yeah.
simple, get you to what you need to get to so that you don't spend time doing it. What we hear customers say over and over is, I just don't want to do this stuff. So we want to make sure that they don't have to.
Yeah. No, I love that. You kind of alluded to this with the recent suggestion to your team, but I always like to ask
Yeah,
this question selfishly, but also for my audience as well.
yeah.
What books or people, whether it's early in your career or now, have influenced you the most?
Oh, so much. Okay, so books that I think about a lot, other than that Ben Horowitz book I just mentioned, True North. I can't remember the author. It's a blue book. True North is really good. I think about it a lot. I also think about there's a board management book by Brad Feld I think about a lot. I participated in Techstars and they give you this like little stack of books on your first day. And one of the stack of books was Venture Deals. And early days when I was raising, I didn't know anything about anything. And that thing just reads like a Bible in venture and it just saved me over and over. I think about that book a lot. I even refer to it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, People, I will say, I am a fan of stories of people's experiences. This is why I like
Yeah.
podcasting. I think on books. I think there isn't one person, but there is the universal journey, period, that just matters so much to and did matter early days. So, like how I built this
Love
got me
that one.
through because it is constantly, isn't it great? Like it's over and over these stories of people's startup journey that just you don't expect to have won
Yeah.
and they won. And it just is a constant reminder that even though the system isn't set up for complete success for everyone, and you don't see yourself resemble in certain arenas, or you feel like you're failing, or it's not working out, you're hearing time after time all these people that failed a million times and they were
Yeah.
still successful. And that thing, I think, is what constantly inspires me. No matter who's telling that story to me is just so powerful that if we could galvanize behind your journey is unique to you, and there is no right way, it just is. And if you stay at it, you'll be great.
Yeah. I love the plug on how I built this
Mhm.
because in essence
Yeah,
is what I want this podcast to kind of embody, which is learning
yeah,
about the founder journey, learning about the tools necessary to scale and build a
yeah,
business, and learning about the hardships and challenges that you overcome and the lessons from that. Because there's so much to gather
yeah,
from that experience and that information that not only motivates you as a founder, but also kind of keys you
yeah,
into certain ways that you can solve the problems that you're facing. I know we're at the end of the show here, and
yeah,
I'm so appreciative of you taking time and walking through your journey and the whole building process, where you're at and what you focus on, and your philosophies around
yeah,
building teams and building, the product. But last little bit, I always like to give my guests a chance
yeah.
to give us your plugs. So let me know on LinkedIn and websites, Twitter, where can we be a part of the journey? And if I'm a
Uh,
small business, where can I find the
sure.
product and start using it?
Yeah, compliant is at ComplYant.co, compliant with a Y, ComplYant.co, and we are compliant everywhere. Compliant with a Y on Twitter, on Facebook, compliant app actually, everywhere. And then me personally, you can find me everywhere with the same handle, Shiloh A. Johnson. I'm on every platform. I keep it simple because, don't want to overcomplicate, but yeah, that's where you can find us.
I love it. Well, I hope you enjoyed yourself, Charlotte, and thank you so much for being on the show.
And You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.